You are sitting next to a fire. It's 14,000 years ago. The meat from today's hunt is almost gone. It's cold, it's dark. And at the edge of the firelight, just barely visible, there is a wolf. Not attacking, not fleeing, just watching. You could kill it. You've killed things like it before. But something makes you pause. Maybe you toss it a bone. Maybe you don't. You'll never know which choice you actually made. But one of your ancestors made the right one, and what came out of that moment didn't just change what humans ate. It changed what humans became. Here's the question underneath all of that. What if the decision to keep animals instead of eating them wasn't a human decision at all? What if the animals had something to do with choosing us? The answer isn't one thing. It's never just one thing. There's the efficiency myth that doesn't hold up to a single skeleton. There are animals that auditioned for the role. There's a chemical bond older than any language. And there's a species that almost rewrote African history and simply refused to cooperate. Each layer is stranger than the last. Let's go. Start with what almost everyone assumes. That domestication was a logical upgrade, smarter, more efficient, a reliable food supply instead of the gamble of the hunt. That's the story we tell. It's wrong. Clark Spencer Larson at Ohio State University spent years analyzing skeletal remains from the agricultural transition across North America and the Near East. What he found in 1995 upended the whole narrative. Early farmers were shorter than the hunter-gatherers they replaced, by 4 to 6 inches on average. They had more disease markers in their bones, lower bone density, worse teeth, and iron deficiency anemia at rates more than 50% higher than the foragers in the same regions. At Çatalhöyük, in Turkey, one of the most advanced early farming sites on Earth, dating to 7,500 BCE, residents showed severe enamel hypoplasia lines carved into teeth by nutritional stress during childhood. At Dixon Mounds in Illinois, the shift from foraging to maize farming between 1000 and 1300 CE produced a 26% spike in bone lesions, indicating that children were going hungry. In ancient Greece, average male height dropped from roughly 5'10" in the Mesolithic to around 5'3" by 400 BCE. The cause was grain, calorie-dense, micronutrient poor, monotonous grain. Early farmers didn't gain a food system. They traded a diverse, flexible diet for a fragile, narrow one, and their bodies recorded the cost permanently. The first farmers weren't thriving. They were surviving, and they'd already passed the point of no return. Now, let's talk about who actually initiated this arrangement. Because it wasn't entirely us. Brian Hare at Duke University published research in 2012 showing that domesticated dogs, unlike wolves raised under identical conditions, display something called spontaneous social referencing. When a dog encounters a problem it can't solve, it looks at a human for help. Wolves don't do this. It's not trained, it's selected. Hare's argument was that the wolves who became dogs didn't wait to be captured. The ones with lower fear responses drifted toward human camps. They ate the scraps. They reproduced. Their offspring were slightly less afraid. Generation by generation, fear was selected out not by humans breeding animals, but by proximity filtering the population naturally. Dmitry Belyayev confirmed how fast this can happen. Starting in 1959 at the Institute of Cytology and Genetics in Novosibirsk, Belyayev selected silver foxes for only one trait: reduced fear of humans. Within 10 generations, the foxes had floppy ears, piebald coats, and were wagging their tails. Tameness is a package. Change the stress response, and the whole animal follows. The Bonn Oberkassel dog specimen, dated to 14,000 BCE, shows isotopic evidence of a dog eating human food scraps before intentional breeding programs existed. And in the Fertile Crescent, the wildcat Felis sylvestris libica simply followed rodents into human grain stores. Farmers didn't capture them, they tolerated them. And tolerance, over centuries, became domestication. We didn't tame them. They auditioned for us, and we didn't even know we were holding callbacks. Here's something else that almost never comes up: the The bond that formed wasn't just behavioral, it was neurochemical, and it was mutual. In 2015, Miho Nagasawa at Asabu University in Japan published a study in Science measuring oxytocin, the bonding hormone, in both humans and their dogs during eye contact sessions. Dogs who gazed longest at their owners showed a 130% increase in oxytocin. Their owners showed a 300% increase. Wolves raised by humans showed no such response at all. This loop, the same neurochemical pathway that bonds human mothers to their infants, had been co-opted across species lines. An elderly person buried at Ain Malaha in Israel around 12,000 BCE was found with their hand resting on a puppy. That's the oldest known deliberate human-dog burial. It predates formal agriculture. In ancient Egypt, tomb paintings at Beni Hassan from around 1900 BCE show dogs on leashes with named collars, not tools, individuals. At Skovgard in Denmark, an 850 CE Viking burial placed a woman with 4 dogs arranged at her feet and head. These were not working animals being honored. These were companions being grieved. Oxytocin is the brain's social glue. Dogs that could trigger it in humans got better food, better shelter, better protection. That response got reinforced across every generation since. The first time a human looked into a dog's eyes and felt something, that feeling was evolution talking. Everything we've covered so far assumes humans were in control of this process. They weren't. And the moment you accept that, the rest of domestication history makes a completely different kind of sense. Because here's the thing that archaeology keeps revealing. Animals weren't kept for food first. They were kept for meaning. Richard Meadow, at Harvard's Zoo Archaeology Lab, analyzed faunal remains from Mehrgarh in Pakistan, a site occupied from 7,000 to 5,500 BCE. Cattle bones in the earliest layers appear not in food refuse, middens, the garbage piles of everyday eating, but in ritual deposits and elite burials. At Çatalhöyük, bull skulls were plastered directly into the walls of homes, not stored, not displayed as trophies, built into the architecture of the house itself. At Nabda Playa in the Nile Valley around 7000 BCE, cattle were buried in stone-roofed chambers and treated with the same ritual care as human dead. And in ancient Irish Brehon law from the 7th century CE, a chieftain's social rank wasn't measured by what he owned, it was measured by how many cattle he could afford to give away. The animal as currency. The animal as cosmology. In a world where food was never guaranteed, having an animal you chose not to eat was the loudest possible signal of power. Livestock were a biological savings account, a living reserve, a statement. The cow in the field wasn't dinner. It was the ancient equivalent of a bank account that mooed. Now, let's tackle the biggest myth here, that any animal could have been domesticated if humans just tried hard enough. Jared Diamond at UCLA laid this out definitively in 1997. Of 148 large wild terrestrial mammals on Earth, only 14 have ever been successfully domesticated. The rest failed at least one of 6 essential criteria: diet efficiency, growth rate, captive breeding, temperament, social hierarchy, and flight instinct. Zebras look like horses. Multiple cultures tried to domesticate them. Every attempt failed. Zebras bite and they don't let go. Lord Rothschild drove a zebra carriage through London in 1898 as a publicity stunt, but it took years of conditioning a single individual, and that individual's behavior never became heritable. The African buffalo, Cincerus caffer, kills more hunters per year in Africa than any other animal. It has lived alongside cattle for millennia and has never been domesticated. And cheetahs, kept by Assyrian kings and Mughal emperors as hunting animals for centuries, were never successfully bred in captivity until modern zoos. Every generation of tame cheetah had to be caught wild and reconditioned from scratch. Domestication is not training. It is a genetic restructuring that can only happen across generations of selected reproduction. Without heritable tameness, there is no domestication, only taming. The zebra could have changed human history. It just never agreed to the terms. This is where it gets strange, because the cases where humans tried to force domestication tell you everything. Rome watched Hannibal use war elephants to devastating effect at battles like Trebia and Zama, and wanted the same capability. Roman war elephants were wild captured, not bred in captivity, and at the Battle of Thapsus in 46 BCE, several of Scipio's elephants turned on their own handlers under pressure. Rome never built a stable, self-sustaining elephant population. Every animal had to be retamed from the wild, every generation at enormous cost. In 1949, the Soviet Union launched a moose domestication program in Kostroma, Russia. Moose could theoretically produce milk, transport loads through forest terrain that horses couldn't navigate. Moose calves, raised from birth, do become tame, but their tameness doesn't transfer to offspring reliably. The Kostroma moose farm still exists. After 75 years, it has never scaled. Every generation has to be rehabituated from scratch. Both programs bypass the same thing, the self-selection phase. No animal was drawn toward humans by mutual benefit. They were compelled. And compulsion, it turns out, cannot do what evolution does. Domestication is a negotiation. You cannot negotiate with a species that has nothing to gain. There's one last thing I saved for the end. The story of domestication is not a story about human ingenuity. It is a story about coevolution. Two species drifting toward each other along gradients of mutual benefit and accidentally building the world. Humans didn't invent civilization and then bring animals into it. The animals were there first. Writing was invented to track grain and livestock. The earliest law codes are primarily property law for animals. The horse and the elephant reshaped warfare. Cattle sacrifice was the original transaction with the divine. Every city on Earth exists because some animals, 15,000 years ago, stopped running. And the communities that kept animals close enough, long enough, absorbed their diseases. Smallpox, measles, influenza, tuberculosis, all traced to domesticated animals and built genetic resistance that populations without livestock entirely lacked. When Hernan Cortés landed in 1519 with 600 soldiers, the smallpox that came with him, a cattle origin disease, killed an estimated 5 to 8 million Aztecs within 2 years. The most decisive weapon in human history came from a barnyard. Living with animals was costly. It was also the most devastating geopolitical advantage ever accumulated entirely by accident. The deadliest weapon Europeans brought to the New World wasn't a sword. It was a sneeze, and it came from a cow. Which brings us back to that fire. Back to that wolf at the edge of the light. That moment happened millions of times before one wolf got close enough to take a piece of meat and didn't die for it. Before one human let it. Before both animals, and yes, we were both animals, decided the warmth was worth the risk. The wolf's descendants are asleep in beds right now. Ours built everything you can see from any window on Earth. We didn't domesticate them. We just made enough space at the fire and the right ones walked in.